Welcome to Next Level Play Therapy, a weekly podcast dedicated to supporting the next generation of child and adolescent therapists to provide exceptional play therapy services. We'll explore all things play therapy to elevate your work with children and adolescents using the therapeutic powers of play. I'll discuss practical tips and ideas so you can provide a transformative experience for your young clients and make a real difference in their lives. So get ready to take your play therapy skills to the next level and make a lasting impact in the lives of children, adolescents, and families. Hey there, if you're a play therapist, then I'm curious if you have ever felt like you were chasing after parents, trying to convince them to schedule an appointment with you, responding to crisis calls frequently in between sessions, but then also feeling frustrated that you couldn't get them to come in and meet with you. Or maybe you're not sure what to say to parents, or you just find yourself feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, and having secret thoughts. Oh, I wish I could just work with the kids and not have to work with the parents or not have to deal with the parents. So if that's you, then this is the episode for you. I have found over the last 30 years working in the mental health field that these are some typical things that come up, and there's usually things that can be done on your end of it to make things better. And this is a lot of what we talk about in my Play Therapy Academy program, which is my online play therapy training program where we meet twice a month and there are courses. But the whole idea really is to help the next generation of play therapists really feel competent to accomplish the goal that they have, which is to help children heal. I mean, that's why we get into play therapy, right? Because we want to help children heal. And to do that, we really need to understand and conceptualize that children exist within family systems and their parents are the therapeutic agents of change. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is children are with their parents or those adults in their life that are acting in a parenting role, like foster parents or grandparents because they're not living with parents. Parents who parents are, I'll refer to parents as those adults in their lives who are acting in that parenting role. And kids are with their parents way more than they are with you. They may be seeing you anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour once a week. The rest of the time, they're with their parents. And so if we don't really conceptualize that children exist within a family system and their parents are their therapeutic agents of change, then we can miss a really important component of helping children heal. And what if parents are hard to engage, right? That happens. So that's what I want to talk about today. Over the last 30 years and working the last 15 years with other play therapists, helping them to take their play therapy skills to the next level, there are some things that I've learned, and I thought I would share those with you today. So I've been working on a brand new course, which is about to launch any day now, within the next week or two. And these are some of the things that I talk about in the course. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to talk about this on my weekly live stream and my podcast because I think it's really important, and I just thought I'd share. So that's what I'm going to do today. If you're watching on the live stream, I would love to know who's here today. Post your name in the comments. Where are you from? What population do you work with? What are some of your questions about working with parents? The likelihood I have put those questions in my parenting course and maybe addressing those today is pretty high, because the things I'm going to go over today are things that come up a lot. And in fact, the people in the Play Therapy Academy, I got their feedback. Like, if you guys had the course that you wanted to answer all the questions and concerns that come up for you, what would you want in the course? And so they gave me a bunch of feedback, and I put all of that in the course. And so the likelihood these are things that you're going to relate to is pretty high. And if you want to ask questions, please feel free to do that. If you're watching on the replay or listening on the podcast, feel free to post your questions. The only thing that I ask is not to post specific client information, because this is a public format. So, all right, so let's get started. I'm going to share 4 tips that I have learned over the last 30 years. The first one is identify your expectations. So what do I mean by that? I'll give you a little story. How I came upon this little nugget of gold. As play therapists, we want to be helpful. We want to be supportive. We want to support parents and families. And so sometimes we try to accommodate and do things a little differently than what is typical. And so this was years and years and years ago. And I remember a situation where another family member was doing childcare while mom worked, single mom, and mom worked. And so the other family member was bringing the child, but the child lived with mom and mom's partner. And what became clear as I began working with the child was that I really needed to engage mom at the very least, and partner if possible. And so I began to, I had been meeting with the child and touching base with grandma here and there. And grandma was doing what she could to support the child and daughter. And so, but there were some things that kept popping up over and over that were out of grandma's ability to do anything about. And it became very clear that I needed mom to be involved. And so I began to make the phone calls, and I would talk to mom briefly, and she would say, yeah, I'll call you back. And then I'd wait, and I wouldn't get any phone calls back. And so then I would call back, and she would schedule an appointment and then cancel. And so then I would call back, and then finally I'd get her in. Like, this was probably 6 or 8 weeks later. And I finally got mom in, and we were starting to talk about things. And then I tried to meet again a few weeks later. Same kind of thing happened over and over and over. And what I came to realize was, and I found myself getting frustrated and kind of blaming mom, and because she wasn't coming in. And then I thought, you know what? I need to take a step back and take a good hard look about this. Like, why am I getting so frustrated? Well, I'm getting frustrated because mom's a key part of the change process, and she seems really reluctant to engage in the change process. And whenever I did get a chance to meet with her, she wasn't really following through with anything. And so I thought to myself, you know what are my expectations? That's when I decided, you know what, rather than kind of blaming mom, I thought, well, I only have control over me, so let me take a look at this. And when I got really honest with myself, I realized, you know what, I had never communicated my expectations from the start. I didn't even know what my expectations were until I started getting frustrated that these expectations weren't being met. I always give the analogy, it's kind of like any of you who are maybe living with somebody or married. My husband and I have been married for a million years, but I remember back in the beginning, and because I do counseling, and some of you guys may relate, new couples getting frustrated with each other and irritated and getting into these kind of stupid little petty arguments. And then what you kind of find out in therapy is that, you have these unspoken, maybe even unconscious expectations about how things are supposed to work. And you really only know they're not working when you're irritated and frustrated, and maybe in the marital relationship or couple relationship, you're getting your feelings hurt. But you really only know they're not getting met when you find yourself irritated and frustrated. So I took a step back and thought, okay, why am I getting so frustrated about this? And what are my expectations? Like, what do I expect from parents and why? Why do I expect that from parents? And what I got really clear on was, what are my expectations? Are those 5-minute check-ins at the end of the session going to work? No, because you don't, in my opinion, because you don't really get a lot of engagement. Maybe it'll work for the low acuity families, the really high functioning, highly motivated. Those little 5-minute check-ins will probably work for those parents. But for the more complex family systems, that doesn't typically work. And so what I realized was my expectation is I need parents to be involved so play therapy can be more effective for their child. And in order to do that, I need to be really clear about who I'm going to meet with, when I'm going to meet with them, what we're going to do in those sessions. And the other thing is, how am I going to respond to those kind of crisis calls or, hey, here's what Billy's doing. And it doesn't seem like, Billy's getting in trouble again at school, or Laura's having meltdowns at home that last all day. It's not working. Those phone calls that you get, but you're not getting parent engagement. You really need to have established what your expectations are around parent involvement and why that's important. Because that comes to the next step, which is, once you know what your expectations are and why you have those expectations, then you need to communicate those from the get-go, like from your first contact with parents. Here's how play therapy works. Here's my expectations for your involvement. Here's why that's important. In order to get the best outcomes for your child, you and I really need to meet. That's when we'll put you'll give me an idea how things are going, because I'm not going to know how Billy is doing in between sessions unless you and I talk and you can give me some feedback. That's what these parent sessions are for. You and I will kind of put our heads together and figure out some solutions. And what kind of support would you like as parents? How can I support you? Your child is with you most of the time. They meet with me once a week. This partnership is really important. And I communicate that from the start, because if that's not going to work, maybe they don't really want to be involved, or maybe they don't, maybe they're court involved and they're coming to get you involved in the court process and you don't want to be involved in the court process. You need to clarify that from the beginning, because if it's not a good fit, you will have had that communication in the very beginning. And the reason that's beneficial for your clients is they can get somebody who's going to focus on more of what they feel like they want to focus on. Now, you may or may not kind of professionally believe that that's the most effective way to go about doing it. And you can plant some seeds just maybe for the next person to kind of water those seeds a little bit and that become more clear. Or maybe they will find somebody who can get at what's going on in a way that works more effectively than it does with you. The thing is, communicating those at the very beginning will reduce a lot of the frustration. Plus, you're also clear on what your expectations are. And you're communicating those expectations from the beginning. And that way parents are aware of what the expectations are. They've agreed to these when they've engaged in treatment with you. And then a lot of times what'll happen is something will come up along the way and you'll have to have those conversations about that. And you will have already had that from the beginning, so it won't be new. The expectations were communicated to them, and now when it comes up again, it's just more of a reminder and figuring out what the barriers are and working through that process with them to get back on track. I would also suggest that you have these expectations written down, like you have in your informed consent documentation about, hey, here's how things work here. I would highly recommend that be part of your informed consent, how you're going to handle phone calls. Are there any fees for phone calls if you're in private practice? If you work for an agency, what are the agency's expectations around those things? How do you handle crises? All of those things, providing some information, all of those things, I would highly recommend that you put those down in a document that they sign. They can even get a copy of it. I would definitely make sure they have a copy of it. And that way, there's also that written documentation. People don't always remember. There's like so many things that get covered in the beginning. So having a written documentation, a document, I find that to be really helpful. So first, identify your expectations. 2, once you have identified those, then you want to clearly communicate those. And then the next one is one people don't really think about, but this comes up so much when I am doing consultation. So I think it's an important thing to think about. And all of us, myself included, have gone through this. I remember the very beginning being a new child and adolescent therapist and just learning all the things and being so mission focused to make a difference in the lives of my clients, to help children heal, to help families heal. So focused on that. And I seem to, you question everything because you're new and you're like, I don't know. So I found this one. If you're having a hard time engaging reluctant parents, then I would highly recommend taking a step back as well to identify your imposter syndrome. If you find yourself becoming anxious about what to say to parents, or whether parents feel like you're helping, like maybe you worry that they're going to see that you're a fraud because you're sure that you're a fraud and you don't know what you're doing, and any day they're going to find out and pull their child from services, and that'll mean that you failed and didn't help, and just reinforces all of those mean things you're telling yourself in your head. Um, if you find yourself feeling anxious and overwhelmed and frustrated and really anxious and wishing you could not work with parents, then I would highly recommend that you take a step back and see if your imposter syndrome has kicked in. Most play therapists, most of our training is focused on working with the child. Most of us did not get a lot of training how to work with parents. And in your master's degree program, the likelihood that you had a lot of courses, if you're a child and adolescent therapist, how many child and adolescent courses did you take? Maybe one. Maybe you got a course on family therapy, but most of our graduate level courses in the counseling field or clinical social work field are focused on the individual. Unless you're in the marriage and family therapy field, then you got a lot of that. But most of the other programs don't do that. I was lucky because I did. That was my clinical social work program, was all child and adolescent and family systems. But most people don't. So there's not a lot of training in how to work with parents. There's not a lot of training in how to work with kids. And there's not a lot of training. There's even less on how to work with parents. And so when you start doing typically a lot of your postgraduate training in play therapy, most of the training is doing individual counseling with the child. And so there's not a lot about working with parents and not a lot about working with families, which is one of the main reasons I created the course, kind of taking all my 30 years of experience and packing that into a course, which will be launching in a couple weeks. But to me, I think one of the reasons imposter syndrome gets activated is because there isn't a lot of information or a lot of work or training around that. And yet parents view you as the expert. You may or may not feel like the expert, but parents view you as the expert. And in fact, you are the expert. So they're coming to you for help. And if your imposter syndrome gets activated, then the likelihood you're going to second guess yourself, the likelihood you're going to have parents participating in ways that you have no plan or focus, which can be confusing for them. It can be confusing for you. So if you don't identify that imposter syndrome, then the likelihood it's going to interfere with your effectiveness in forming that therapeutic rapport with parents to help them engage, especially the more reluctant parents, then that's going to create problems for you to help them be engaged and make sure you're on the right track, because you're always second guessing yourself. And then once you start second guessing yourself, it's kind of like you start throwing in different activities or things you're going to do, and you switch gears all the time. I call that the throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping something sticks method. It does not typically work very well. And it's usually rooted in your imposter syndrome. So recognize when that's happened and use some self-compassion. If you need help, then get support. Get some support on helping you to figure out what's going on so that you can get back on track and feel more confident and engage parents more effectively in the change process. So, and then the third tip that I wanted to share today is really how to structure these sessions for success. And this is really going to be dependent upon your expectations. So if you haven't done step 1 and step 2, step 4 is going to be really challenging because you're not necessarily going to have an idea of how you want parents to be involved. So structuring those parent sessions will be kind of confusing. So that you need to make sure you do those first. But then once you figure out who you want to make sure is involved in the session, figuring out how often you're going to meet with parents, who are you going to meet with, when are you going to meet with them, how often are you going to meet with them? Those are all the things you want to figure out, kind of structure the approach that you're taking so that you can get consistent engagement. And that's the key, getting that consistency so that you can develop rapport with parents. And then when you are giving them feedback about making some changes, they're more likely to trust you because you're meeting consistently in a private space without the child around. And in those sessions, you can really focus on what support parents need from you so that they can be that therapeutic agent of change for their child. This also gives you some privacy with the parent in order to have those conversations. And one of the things that you'll be communicating with parents about with expectations at the beginning is how you're going to handle privacy around their child sessions, and making sure that when you are figuring out your structure and you are meeting with parents, that you are still maintaining that privacy and you're focusing more on providing support to parents. So the other thing is your play therapy theoretical model is going to really influence how you're working with parents. And what I mean by that is if you are using child-centered play therapy, then the parents are not in the session. If you're saying that you're a child-centered play therapist and you are having parents come into the session and they're part of the session ongoing, then you're not really doing child-centered play therapy. You're doing something else, which is fine. I'm all about getting parents in the session and doing some of that parent-child work. But that's not child-centered play therapy. That might be TheraPlay. TheraPlay has a specific way in which you engage parents. There are specific stages that you go through in the process. Filial therapy or child-parent relationship therapy, both of those they use that child-centered play therapy model, but you're teaching the parents to use the skills. And there's a process for how you do that. So there's that intentional plan about why parents are in there based on those models and what you're doing. If you're using child-centered play therapy, parents are part of the change process. They're just not in the session with the child. You're meeting with them in separate sessions and doing that parent work with them, and there's parent consultation sessions. If you're using like Adlerian play therapy, then you're going to engage parents, and the expectations and the way in which you engage parents will be focused on using Adlerian play therapy. If you're using prescriptive play therapy, then you're using a model for parent engagement and you're following that. So I use a lot of neuroscience and attachment theory. And in fact, I have an attachment-focused family play therapy model. I have a book about that, Attachment-Focused Family Play Therapy, an intervention for children and adolescents after trauma, and in that book, I kind of spell out the model. I use that model, attachment-focused family play therapy, for a lot of types of presenting symptoms and find it to be really useful way to engage parents. But when I'm using that model and I'm engaging parents, there's a specific way that I go about doing that. There are things that we work on in the beginning. There are different stages. There are different things we're going to be doing in the different stages. So when you're structuring those parent sessions or structuring how parents are going to be involved, when you're identifying your expectations and you're communicating those expectations, part of what you're communicating is how often are we going to meet? What is that going to look like? And you are going to be using a play therapy model to engage parents, because that's going to influence how you conceptualize their role in the play therapy process. For example, when I'm using my attachment-focused family play therapy model, then I conceptualize parents as active participants who are partnering with me in the change process. And so I meet with them. We go over the model. We go over what their role is going to be, what my role is going to be, what is that going to look like, how often are we going to meet. We figure out who's going to be in the sessions, and I've clearly communicated them, and I'm providing support in a certain way to parents in the sessions. So I'm supporting parents as much as I am supporting the child. And that is based on the model that I'm using and understanding their role as creating secure attachments with their child. And we're working on creating those secure attachments and doing some of that attachment repair and helping parents learn about co-regulation and their role as the co-regulator and how that actually helps their child when they're able to do that. So identifying those expectations, communicating those expectations, and then structuring how parents are going to be involved, their role in the change process, and what theory model you're using is a really important part of the process. And if your imposter syndrome gets activated, then you really need to be able to recognize it and then deal with it. So those are my 4 tips for engaging reluctant parents in the play therapy process. I am just going to let me do a quick recap. 1, identify your expectations. One of the things that I have noticed over the last 30 years, and especially the last 15, doing a lot of consulting with play therapists, is when you start getting frustrated, overwhelmed, confused, and anxious, when you think about working with parents, the likelihood you have not identified your expectations is very high. And maybe you don't feel like you know what your expectations should be because you don't feel like you don't know what you're doing. That's an important one that activated your imposter syndrome. So you need to deal with your imposter syndrome so that you can identify your expectations. The second thing is making sure you communicate your expectations from the very beginning. That helps parents know what their role is. It helps parents know that you have that you're going to support them, that they're part of the change process, that they have a really important role, and you're there to support them as much as you are to support the child. And the way they're going to do that is they're going to work with you this way. This is how you're going to work together. And then we're going to partner. We're going to do this together. And then the third thing is make sure that you have identified your imposter syndrome. It's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when, in the beginning, especially. Anytime you're learning something new, we all have imposter syndrome when we're learning something new. But recognize when your imposter syndrome has kicked in, because it will undermine your effectiveness working with parents. So you definitely want to recognize when that's happened. And then now that you know what your expectations are, structure. How are you going to structure parent involvement? How are they going to be involved? What's their role in the change process? How often are you meeting? How are you handling communication in between sessions? What are the expectations around that? What are the limitations of that? And how are you going to handle privacy? What are you going to focus on in those sessions when you are working with parents? So that is it for today. If you're interested in learning more about the courses that I have, just pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. I put the banner on the bottom. That one's for supervision. I'll tell you a little bit about Play Therapy Academy, but I have a few courses. If you are interested in the courses, just click on the courses tab. If you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, that's my online consultation program. So we meet twice a month. And in those 2 meetings, twice a month, in each meeting, we have 2 people presenting. We're focused on staffing your clients, supporting the work that you are doing. So you not only get my 30 years of experience and my brain, you get the combined wisdom of everybody in the group. And we have some really talented people with some really amazing insights. So you get a really well-grounded, support. And when somebody else is staffing, you're still learning. You get to see what play therapy looks like with different play therapy models and different client presentations. You get to hear how we are working through challenges with parenting engagement and helping parents to become more engaged, to be those therapeutic agents of change for their child. So we do a lot of that in Play Therapy Academy. There are also courses in there to help you really ground your play therapy case conceptualization, your treatment planning, writing treatment plans, progress notes, and this course, Working with Parents, is going to be in there as well. All of the courses, maybe you don't need Play Therapy Academy. Maybe you just need some of the courses. Those are available even if you're not in Play Therapy Academy. So you may just want to pop over there to my website and check out those resources. Check out Play Therapy Academy. I do have some openings right now. So I have openings in my Saturday group and I have openings in the Wednesday group. If you're interested, schedule a free 30-minute video call with me, and we'll talk about how Play Therapy Academy can help you really take your play therapy skills to the next level, to build your confidence and help you make a difference in the lives of your child and adolescent clients. So that is it for today, and I will see you next week. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Next Level Play Therapy. I hope you found the discussion valuable and gained new insights and ideas to support your work helping children, adolescents, and families heal. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback helps to improve and reach more people who can benefit from this information. Remember, play therapy is a powerful tool for healing and growth. Whether you're a new play therapist or experienced, I encourage you to continue your learning journey to unlock the potential of play in your own work and relationships. If you have any questions or topic suggestions for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on social media and visit my website at Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training to stay updated on upcoming episodes, trainings, and resources. Thank you once again for listening to Next Level Play Therapy. Until next time, keep playing, learning, and growing.